Hi, welcome, Jim from Avstar. If you've been following me over the last few days, you know that we made an invitation out to Ben Davison's ex-wife to come over to the UK, have a little bit of fun. I'll show her the UK, but more importantly, we'll give her the mic and we'll let her, get her side of the story across, because we know for sure Ben Davison has got the microphone and he's not handing it over to her. And that raises a lot of suspicious behaviour, and I think that is fitting with who we're dealing with, suspicious observers, and we should be, because I'm still to this day wondering what that coach or that Winnebago or that motorhome was all about, observing. He started the Kickstarter off, I believe he got over £20,000. He might have even got way more than that. But he's also done a few other Kickstarters as well for his ranch, and he's tried to sell little bits of the ranch off, breaking it off, making, a reasonable amount of profit. I believe the reason why Kat won't pick up that phone and come over to the UK is because simply there's something more seedy going on here than what we all understand. I think this is a rig up. This is a setup. I think he's got himself into trouble. I think maybe he's got a couple of lawsuits on his back, and he's been sued. And if that ain't the case, then it's probably down to not paying tax or something like that. But I wouldn't mind betting that he has shifted his wealth over to Kat. And maybe they're both in on it. Look, the only way we're going to find out is if one of them slip up or they talk about it. That's the only way. Because right now, the way it stands is that Ben has blamed his wife for running off with another guy. That is very convenient, isn't it? And that is the very, very thing he would do. Because he would, by doing that, maintain his earnings from his channel. And he would obviously, he's going to make it, he's going to put it in a category, he's going to categorize it. If I say it's me that's run off with another woman, which is more than likely the case, because I know Ben, he 180s on everything. When he says it's black, trust me, it's white. And I've known him for, I don't know, it must be a good 10 years. I knew him when he had less than 100,000 subscribers, and he was arguing with someone from a channel called can't remember, it doesn't come to them, it's that long ago. That might come back to me a bit later on in this video. But yeah, he was arguing in my comment section, accusing this guy of something. This guy was accusing him. I said, just take it away, go away. But here's the big thing. Just look at this. Space weather news. And then we've got astrophysics, geophysics, and space weather. And more if you want to click on it. What qualifications in any of those science fields does he have? And I think we should call out just not him, but a few others as well. We might do that, we'll just see. But it's wrong, isn't it? When people like me, take our time out, we study at university, costs a frigging fortune to do so, and then someone comes along, learns a few key words, starts spouting it off in a sentence, and people start believing this grifter as being, a foundation on this topic. They are suitable to listen to so that you get taught what you need to. I've always said, qualifications are important, because if ever someone says to you, what qualifies you to talk about this subject, I can say, well, I've studied biology, I've studied physics, chemistry, maths, earth science, astronomy. I can say I've got a qualification, in those fields, and that's what qualifies me to talk about it. I've also got 10 years in the field of geomagnetics. Yeah, someone like this can come along and just talk about geomagnetics as though they're their expert, and really they're clearly not. And I think he really has got himself in trouble now. Not only do I have qualifications, I've got the equipment that monitors, the magnetic North Pole position and its migration. Took 2 years to program it and build it, but I did it. What equipment does Ben ever show us that he has either built or paid to be built that as in line with what he talks about? He talks about this other thing as well. And here's the thing, I've chosen my time to have a go back at him now, because it's been a long time in the way, he deserves a little slap down for what he's done and what he's said over the years. He's tried to, destroy my character, reputation, whatever, but it doesn't really matter anyhow, because we're only talking YouTube in any case. But, he's did his best in his on-the-fly videos that he's done. I know the same people he knows, and it's just a fast. He's got no equipment, and he's got no qualifications, and he really has little knowledge in the things he talks about. Yet he can point his finger at people that work for NASA, the European Space Agency, and a lot of other important agencies where people have actually taken it upon themselves, like I have, to study the topics and the disciplines, and we've earned the right to talk about them. And then this little whipper comes along and just rips everybody off with no qualifications and no equipment, yet talking about using stereo A, stereo B satellites that monitor the sun and his solar flares. And here's another one that I really like about what he said about the micronovae. I found that hilarious, and I'm sure anyone else in solar physics has laughed at that, because if you're talking about a micronova, you're talking about probably a good X-class flare. You're not talking about a supernovae, because novae is the star exploding, full stop. But we have sat back for years and watched him just become a real little monster on YouTube that has managed to crank up 820,000 people that he has, in my view, deceived, with coming across as though he knows what he's talking about, but not actually knowing what he's talking about. And that is clearly, anyone with any knowledge in these disciplines would recognise instantly, just as I did. So, I've bided my time a little bit. I've watched him do his little tricks, and now I'm going to give him a slap down. And he deserves it, because you've only got to watch his recent videos to know that his eyeballs are popping out his head, and he must be on something. I don't know what, but it's not normal behaviour. He pretends to make his phone calls to his secret people that he's got on the side, that he can call up at any point in time and say they're doing it again. In other words, YouTube are attacking him. It's insane. Absolutely insane. And over the time, I've come across people like Ben Davison on YouTube, and I've even taken it upon myself to engage with a couple of these people, and I could name names. One other person I'm going to name, because he deserves to be mentioned, him and his girlfriend, David Morrell and Leah. Another pair that talk about geomagnetics as though they know what they're talking about, and they clearly haven't got a clue. They talk about all the other things. I really don't. I doubt their qualifications in that field. I really do, because the way that they talk about them is like, a kindergarten person having just a little bit of knowledge on them, and they are grifting it away, just bamboozling people that really don't know nothing about the topic and subject, and this is what your governments do to you on a regular basis. They take advantage of your lack of knowledge in the subject, like CO2, for instance, being, the major cause of climate change right now. But, anyone, with ChatGPT can start having the conversation with that little thing, and you'll very quickly, if you know what to say, tie that robot, that AI that they're all screaming about now, who's so good, you'll tie it in knots. Because the bottom line on CO2 is, that very tiny fraction of CO2 that man is responsible for putting in. These people, these con men, want you to believe that that is the bit that tipped it over the scale, and therefore we've got global warming as a result of man-made, burning fossil fuels and things like that. It's the lack of knowledge that you have that is being exploited from you. And, I've sat around for a decade now saying nothing about these people. I think it's time that the record was set absolutely straight on this. It's not just governments, it's also people that we put trust in every single day on channels like YouTube, on channels like Suspicious Observers, that do not have a clue what they're talking about. That raise money and get the money as well, surprisingly, to, set up a motorhome and drive around all the states in America, observing what I really would love to know. I really would love to know if somebody can tell me what we was observing with that and the money that people invested, then please tell me. If someone can tell me what exactly they get out the Observer Ranch, please, again, tell me, because I know you can buy a bench for $2,000 and have it named after you. I know you can buy a fire pit, but what exactly is all this about, if not just to raise money out of vulnerable people that know no better? I have had to recently, pull myself away from this platform because it's toxic. It really is toxic. And, I'd rather keep just a small amount of people, which I call my special, supportive community over on Patreon. I would rather keep it that small. Because, what I see going on here is nothing short of what the governments have done, and then people have realised how to do it and they've done the exact same thing. It's nothing short of a gross public mistrust. And you should know about it. And I don't really care what you think of me, but, I walk the walk and talk the talk. Yeah, a decade on geomagnetics and magnetic North Pole migration. I brought it to most people's attention, and other people thought, well, this is a good opportunity to cash in on that, and they cashed in on it. But it was never about money, because there is no store where I sell all this prepping gear. There's none of that. There's no mugs, no t-shirts, no hoodies. There never has been. If you wanted to support what we did here, there was just a link, and that was it. And did I ever say you needed to pay this much or that much? No. It was left down to you, and it was never mandatory. So, I'm not going to stay quiet whilst, people have totally taken the piss in the way that they've put me down. And trust me, I've got Schindler's List at the side of me here. I could mention a lot of other names other than Suspicious Observers, and the David Morales of the YouTube empire. I could mention a lot more than that, because the ridiculousness of some of the things I've heard, and that, these people say it with a straight face. They call themselves researchers. At least they're honest enough to call themselves researchers, because they clearly have no clue about what they talk about when it comes to astronomy. No clue when it comes to science. No clue whatsoever when it comes to geomagnetics, because there's only one kid on that block on YouTube, and I think that even some of those bigger organisations would completely agree with me on that, and that is the Mavstar Observatory. And with that, of course, I am going to be interested in what you've got to say in the comments section. May not be what I want to hear, but you know what? You go far away. Freedom of speech, isn't it? Knock yourself out. As always, bye for now.